Welcome back, everyone, to Random Thoughts. Coming to you today with yet another viewer game review. If you want to see your name up in lights and have me break down the game, maybe do some, we'll call it interesting commentary on the games that you played or you thought there was a cool replay, definitely hit me up in Discord, or feel free in the description of this YouTube video to join the Random Thoughts Discord. We're talking a lot of Phobies and trying to set up some Phobies tournaments. There's a lot of fun to be had, but we're going to be breaking down a replay that I'm seeing for the very first time here, and let's jump into it. So, as mentioned, this is a viewer replay, so I don't know exactly what happened. We're going to try and break it down turn by turn and see what happened. Now, the hero of our story, ThatOneKing, is the person who submitted the replay and is going second here on Penny Drop. We see a kind of unusual opener from the bad guy, we'll say, and that's just a solitary cassowary, a lonely cassowary, trying to hold down the fort by itself. They banked a 4. Now, I've seen plays like this typically with a 1-1 opener on this map for somebody going first, because then you can follow it up with, say, Jin Sting, and you can pressure your opponent pretty well, because Jin Sting is relatively tanky, it pushes damage, it has some AoE, and is kind of a bully for early game low-key units. But let's see how King responds here. Cowbell start is pretty fair. Cowbell start is fair, and the positioning is good because this means that it doesn't die to the cassowary leap, of course. Now, the Murder Wing follow-up is interesting to me because that's kind of unexpected, but I can actually respect it. Now, the bad guys here elected to go with Sheep and Gas. Now, if you've been around at all, pause at the wrong time because that was a terrible-looking screenshot to pause on. If you've been around my stream or videos at all, I'm not a huge fan of Sheep and Gas. I just don't do very well with it. But this is a pretty solidly leveled Sheep and Gas. It's actually a level 8, so it's pushing out 605 damage with the explosion, as compared to our level 7 Cassowary, which is just barely edging over 500 damage for its leap. And the good guys have a 530 damage meatball off of this Murder Wing. So this sheep is presenting a fairly significant threat and is going to be an early game bully, similar to what I was describing with Jin Sting. Now, in this particular case, King is electing to be pretty aggressive, so shout out to all the viewers who love when everybody goes for it, and decides to trade for this Murder Wing, or trade for this Cassowary. Why trade? Because I'm expecting, and we'll see if they do it, that the bad guys here are going to dive with the sheep. It would be trading 4 keys for 2, so I can understand it, but here's the thing to keep in mind, and what I think people forget sometimes. It's not always, oh, well, I'm going to get these. Great. So I traded my sheep for 4 keys. That was even. Yeah, but you lost the cassowary. And we should, even though this has almost 1,700 health, should expect to see it go down. Maybe I miscounted this, but given that the Gesundheit is here and in range, this should be a dead sheep. It's, in fact, a very dead sheep. So now King makes the correct choice and takes their capped point. So it's a big swing in damage that's there. And now they're starting to roll out the heavy artillery. We have an Unbearable coming in. The Unbearable and the Gesundheit, while slow, clearly represent a lot of damage. And on this map, you can definitely get Unbearable in positions that it's difficult for your opponent to dive. Now, the bad guy, were able to eliminate the Cowbell. It wasn't long for this world, no matter what. Howdy, YouTube. Yep. By the way, we're doing this live. If you want to come by and watch some live Phobies action, come on over to RTChompGG over on Twitch. But, ooh, oh no. Uh-oh. This is one of my favorite Phobies, and look, I know. I say it about everything. But Noxious is cool because it's a dragon. It's a poisonous dragon who spits on you, which is kind of gross. It's a little unsanitary, but realistically, the alternative is they could set your ass on fire. So I guess, you know, it's like trading one for the other. I don't know. But Noxious is just cool in general. I really like Noxious. I haven't unlocked it yet. It generally presents a challenge for me. And here it's also going to present a challenge. Remember, the ability on Toxic Spittle is an AoE poison. So it does damage, 345 in this case, and then does 345 in a 360-degree radius around the target, plus it applies poison to those targets. Poison is not real good for Unbearable. It's a little unhealthy. So we see the bad guys inching up. The Jar Unbearable Gesundheit team is going to have their work cut out for them. It can get softened up a little bit here, and it's a little bit risky for the Jar to be taking damage. Not necessarily because it can get poisoned, because it can't. But because if it gets tagged with the AoE from Poison Spittle, that means that their Jar can hypothetically just get in range and then blow it up with a single shot. Now, the bad guys here made an interesting choice. They elected to take the center point instead of taking away the top one. Why is that interesting? It's interesting because this just equalizes them as opposed to giving them an advantage in panic points. Now, either way, this thing was going to die because the Unbearable was going to lob onto it. I could see an argument for doing this if the idea is to coax King into committing something to reclaim that point and then they collapse on it. I don't know if that's necessarily worth it, but it is what they did. Now, they're supplementing their forces with Sucky, which we actually, interestingly enough, just had a discussion on stream earlier tonight about. Oh boy, we gotta pause for this one. But Sucky, I'm not a huge fan of this particular phobie. Now, it could be that mine is just under-leveled. This one is a level 6. It's doing 345, like, that's okay. It has almost 1,500 health, that's fine. It just feels like it's not gonna do much, for the most part. And I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of this right now. I feel like there could have been other, maybe the opponent just didn't have any other 2 keys that were worth it. It's possible, depending on how their collection shaped up. But the reason I paused this turn is, look at these panic points. Look at these panic points. That's a lot of orange. Which means the good guys are winning right now. So, the bad guys are going to be able to eliminate this K9000. No, they're not. Wow, they can't even kill the K9000 without committing 100% of their current forces. Ruh-roh. This doesn't seem great. So a Grimes has now officially hit the board. This could get dicey, folks. But we do have a bunch of things in range to soften up their team. They are spread out, so they're not necessarily going to get blown up by Noxious. The Grimes will probably get at least 1 kill. Either the Jar or the Noxious softens up Gesundheit, and then the Grimes goes in for it. But because we have Unbearable, because we have Hevo, because we have Jar, that Grimes is not going to be long for the world. This is going to be super dangerous if they decide to go in. Instead, our opponent elects to play it safer, blow up the Gesundheit, take the free kill with the Noxious. But here, this is the challenge. So our opponent is now out of keys. The good guys still have 4 keys remaining and have a comparable force, because I don't really like Boom, Kerbloom, and Kaboom. I'm not a huge fan of them. This is fine just for retaking points, but obviously I don't expect it to ever connect in a reasonable fashion in this game. The K9 is still very healthy. The Jar is back there. Obviously, the Dragon is pretty healthy. Grimes has now been taking a little bit of damage from the Jar. But they have to, the opponent has to commit into King's forces. And all the King's forces and all the King's phobies here are going to light them up. It's going to be a fireworks show with, you know, we're going to have trebuchets and catapults and all kinds of other medieval siege weaponry, whichever one you happen to prefer. I guess we don't have ballistas here, but we got just about everything else raining down on their heads and clobbering everything. Now, the newly deads here presumably are just to allow for the recaptured panic points, which is fine. The follow-up sheeping gas, I can accept that. Like, that's reasonable. But this particular positioning is not spectacular. 3 phobies got poisoned, one of which doesn't matter. But it does allow the AoE damage that I alluded to earlier, where the Jar snipes our Jar. The good guy Jar. We do give up the majority of the panic points here, but keep in mind, they had to commit, like I was just talking about. So, you have Grimes here, who's not going to die, but you can beat up on him with Unbearable. You have the Dragon, who we can beat up if it's even possible, and we'll see what happens, maybe clear out the canine and then get in and sheep and gas. You can move the sheep down and blow up their jar. There's a lot of bad things that can happen to the bad guys right now. So the play of choice is to eliminate the canine, soften up the Noxious here. I can respect this. This is reasonable. And take down the jar. All of this, now their entire game plan resides on these two carrying the day, because obviously this is not going to do much. They should be able to kill Unbearable here. It's only 600 health remaining, so they're setting up for a better Grimes. But we're going to get 3 attacks in return. And one of them can be a sheep explosion. Do we get the lobs here? We're going to get the finish here. You don't even have to expend the explosion. And now it's a softened up Grimes, who admittedly can get a kill on the sheep. That is possible. But Grimes is not healing off of this. Grimes is going to have to try and 1v1 this Hevo. So the play here instead is we're collecting panic points. Why? They're actually only at 2k health. So while our opponent is pushing a bunch of damage, we're threatening a bunch of damage on them. And it would appear, based on what we're seeing right now, that this is absolutely calculated. There's 900 damage here, but it's not enough to kill here. So now our opponent has to make the choice between chasing down Hevo versus capturing panic points, and as you could probably surmise from the start of the game, before we load it in, how it actually shakes out. And this is something that I think is very relevant in a lot of games that people don't realize. Sometimes it's just a matter of going for the throat. And I know I do this in a lot of games, where I tunnel vision into doing certain activities. And I say, oh, well, I need to kill their phobies. I need to do this. I need to do that. You're just trying to win the game. So it's okay to adjust whatever your strategy is on the fly and adapt to say, oh, well, I can't win this fight. I can't man fight whatever they have left, but I can collect all the panic points and then go face and win. It doesn't matter how you win the game. It's that you won the game. And this is a pretty cool display of exactly that. If we were in game, if this was me, I'd be sweating it. And honestly, I probably would have threw. But shout out to that one guy, both for the submission for the replay and for this awesome game. Which, by the way, like I said at the top, if you want to get your own name and lights for a little bit, you want me to do some reviews, talk about your replays, then let me know. Hit me up in Discord. Again, check the description down on this YouTube video or come by the live stream over on Twitch. But that's going to do it for this time. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And Black Lives Matter.